So who is Jacob working for where we're at right now? Laban. And how is Laban related to him? There you go, mother's brother. So that would make him his uncle. So he fled from Esau because Esau was going to kill him because Jacob had stole his birthright. He had gone to his family's place to work there. And when he's there, he gets married. He married actually both of Laban's daughters. And how long did he work for each daughter?
7 years.
7 years. So he worked for a total of 14 years for his two wives. He also made another agreement in this last chapter where he's going to work for an inheritance because he brought up the fact that he'd been working for him, for Laban, but he actually had nothing. And so he goes, I should be able to work for something for myself. And you remember the kind of the arrangement they made?
Cattle.
Yeah. So basically any of the cattle, and cattle is a general term for sheep and everything else, that was different colored, spotted, streaked, whatever else, that was going to be his hire. And do you know how long he's going to work for him for that? I didn't remember this from last week, but they actually going to point it out in chapter 31. How long did he work doing that? Anyone know? No, 6 years. So he works for Laban for a total of 20 years. Is Laban dealing faithfully with Jacob during this time? No. He didn't deal faithfully when he worked for him for his daughter and the different wages. And even when they made the agreement last chapter to take where Jacob was going to work for the different colored cattle, what did Laban agree to it? And then what immediately did he do?
He gave it to his sons.
He went through his herds and pulled out all those that should have been Jacob's and hid them by giving them to his sons and try to keep them away from Jacob. So again, what we know about Laban is he's not a faithful person. Seems to be a little greedy, seems to be a little deceitful. Is not the best person to go into an agreement with because he's not gonna deal faithfully with you. Anything else from last week? Kind of an abbreviated review because we've got a lot of reading to do.
Jacob started doing the deal with the branches to try to get him to breed the perfect.
Yeah.
It looks like he's kind of learned something from his uncle here. Started moving them as soon as they were born. He's basically moving them out of that flock to a more secure location.
It's a very strange passage that 30 concludes because he does this thing by taking branches of certain trees and peeling them so they're striped. And like I said, I told you last week, people kind of make fun of the Bible saying, oh, what does seeing a striped branch have to do with having striped cattle? I read a lot of stuff. I read some stuff. Some of it said that some of those tree branches that he did use, they've actually found that some things in the bark of that stuff, so they said he put them in the watering troughs and stuff like that, actually do things chemically with animals.
The cattle have more babies.
Yeah, they actually said there are actually studies now that maybe that does help with conception and stuff in animals. So could there have been something medicinal that God had revealed to Jacob that he's doing? Possibly. Or could it have been the other side of it, like, hey, if you do this, it might not make any sense whatsoever, but it's going to then I'm going to reward you for this. Because 31 is going to show us that God was actually talking with Jacob about this. It wasn't just like Jacob doing random things. God was actually instructing him, right? And so I made the example also about Jericho, right? Did walking around that city had anything to do with the city falling down physically? No. It was just obedience. They did what God said. God said, if you do this, this is going to happen. So it could have been that too. We don't know. But what we can for sure say is it was God again. There was a conversation that took place. Jacob followed through, and Jacob was blessed. And also we talked about this with Leah too. When Leah was having more kids than Rachel at first, do you remember what some of the reasoning was for that? That's given? It said that God saw her and saw that she was being mistreated, that she was being loved less, so God rewarded her. Now what's going on with Jacob right here? Is he being cheated? Is he being he's being mistreated? So God sees that. Again, we talked about the idea whenever your things are not going your way or being mistreated and you think no one else knows or no one else cares, God's aware. God sees it. So God is going to reward Jacob for what is. He's being treated bad, but he's not treating Laban bad. He's not returning that evil, and God's going to reward him for that. Okay? All right. Chapter 31, long reading. Someone do the first 16 verses.
And he heard the words of Laban's son, saying, Jacob hath taken away all that was our father's, and that was which our father hath begotten all his glory. And Jacob beheld the countenance of Laban, and behold, it was not toward him as before. The Lord said to Jacob, Return unto the land of thy fathers, and unto thy kindred, and I will be with thee. Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to the field to his flock. He said to them, I see your father's countenance is not toward me as before, but the Lord of my father hath been with me. And ye know that with all my power I have served your father. And your father hath deceived me, and changed my wages 10 times, but God suffered him not to hurt me. If he said thus, the speckle shall be thy wages, and all the cattle both bear speckle. And if he said thus, the ring straight shall be thy hire, then bear all the cattle ring straight. Thus God hath taken away the cattle of your father and given them to me. And it came to pass at the time the cattle conceived that I lifted up mine eyes, and I saw in a dream, and behold, the rams which leaped upon the cattle were ring straight, speckled, and bristled. And the angel of God spake unto me in a dream, saying, Jacob, and I have said, Here am I. He said, Lift up thine eyes, and see, all the rams which leaped upon the cattle are ring straight, speckled, and bristled. For I have seen that all that Laban doeth unto thee. I am the God of Bethel, where thou hast anointed the pillar, and where thou vowedst a vow unto me. Now arise, get thee out from this land, and return to the land of thy kindred. Rachel and Leah answered and said unto him, Is there yet any portion or inheritance for us in our father's house? Are we not counted of him strangers? For he hath sold us, and hath quite devoured also our money. For all the riches which God hath taken from our father, that is ours, and our children's. Now then, whatsoever God hath said unto thee, do.
All right, man, thank you. So we've seen a glimpse of interpersonal relationships here. What does Jacob realize in the first part of our reading here?
That father-in-law had been very good to him, taking away his wages.
He knew that. Because, I mean, I'm not, that's true. I'm not arguing with you. But the thing that changed was apparently when Jacob was working for him and doing all that stuff, and Laban was getting wealthy, Laban apparently somewhat treated him well, was happy with him. He might have been stealing from him, but he was happy that he was there. Now all of a sudden, Jacob hears Laban's sons talking, or overhears them, and what do they say? Yeah, Jacob is stealing from us. All this wealth, because he's working for himself. That's the big thing that changed, right? So all this cattle that he has, those are our father's. It should be ours. Remember what Laban did? He already pulled out all the different colored ones and gave them to his sons. But now all these different colored animals, instead of reproducing in Laban's sons' flocks, are in Jacob's flocks, and Jacob is becoming rich. And again, whenever someone, it's like, my dad used to deal crab in a bucket syndrome. You ever watch crabs in a bucket? Probably not. If you ever have put a bunch of crabs in a bucket, if one of them ever gets to the top like it's going to get out of the bucket, what do the other crabs do? They grab him, and it seems like they pull him down, right? No one likes anybody being perceived better than them. Envy comes into play. Jealousy comes into play. And that is what's happening here. Laban's sons are jealous, envious of the wealth that Jacob is attaining. And they go to their father and saying, he's stealing from you. So how does the Bible say Laban changes toward Jacob? His countenance has changed. He's looking at him different. He's not looking at him happy anymore. He's looking at him suspiciously. He's looking at him as if he considers him a thief, right? So the bad talk of his sons has changed his disposition towards his son-in-law.
It's not evidence to the point of killing him, taking it all back if God wasn't interfering in the situation.
Yes, exactly right. We're going to read that later on in the chapter for sure. And what we know about Laban, even though it's not specifically said, would we put that out of the realm of possibility that Laban would actually kill to maintain his wealth? I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility for Laban at all, because it seems like the only thing he really cares about is the wealth and the That's how he comes across.
I don't think it would take much for them to turn against Jacob anyway. Anybody can say that Stephen would just be his son, he's looking for something else.
Yep. And so this discussion that's taking place, who's this discussion between in these first 16 verses? Jacob and his wives. He called his wives, he overheard the sons talking, Laban's sons talking, and so he calls his wife out in the field where he's working. And he basically presents a case to them, right? Because they are Laban's daughters, and said, this is everything that's going on, and you should be aware of this. And what is their response? Yeah, and I was actually kind of confused about that, and because I looked in the notes, and the notes made a reference to a dowry. Y'all know what is a dowry?
What goes with the bride.
Say again?
It's a savings that goes with the bride.
Right.
Yes.
Traditionally, and this is a very non-traditional situation here. You think back in here again with my names again, right? When Isaac sent his servant to go find him a wife from Laban, Rebecca, am I right on my name so far? Did she stay there with her family, or what did she do?
She left and
She left and went to Isaac. Now, what has Jacob done?
he's done the opposite.
He stayed with his wife's family. That's opposite, because a dowry is usually what the wife's family sends with their daughter as she goes to start her new life with her husband. So this is kind of different right here. So the two girls, Rachel and Leah, point out that their father has devoured their money, spent their dowry. So the money that he should have given them to go on their way and go, knowing what we know about Laban, what has he done? He kept it. They were spending it. Kept it for himself, right? And they already knew that, again, going back to Rebecca, we talked about how many maidservants was sent with her when she left. It was like a troop. And how many did Rachel and Leah get? One each. So yeah, if they're getting ready to leave, which is what they're getting ready to do, are the girls under the delusion that Laban's going to give them a dowry and send them on their way? No, that ain't happening. So
Well, it said that he regards them as foreigners.
yeah,
And
he sold us. We're strangers. There is no way he's giving us a dowry on our way out the door. So they say, all this wealth, Jacob, that you've acquired with the help of God, that is ours and for our children. That is our dowry. So they don't try to talk him out of it. They don't say you're wrong thinking here. They say, you're exactly right. Let's go. Take what God has given you and let's leave. Anything else in there at all?
He goes like 3 days away, right?
Yeah, remember they're already kind of separated, because when they made the agreement with the cattle,
That's right.
he took they got 3 days between the camp, so they're not right there together. These are not small groups of people. These are kind of like Abraham, kind of like these are big groups of people, and so they have to physically separate, especially since they're herdsmen. They couldn't be in real close proximity because they'd be fighting all the time over water and food. So there's some distance between them, but yet Jacob didn't go to his tents to talk to, because they had their separate tents, Rachel and Leah, because someone might overhear. He called them out to the flocks where he was, and has this discussion, makes this plan of what they're going to do. Does anybody have an idea of how old Jacob is right about now? He's not a spring chicken. Yeah, he's around 120. So he's an older man. So all this stuff he's going on, the 20 years he's labored in that field, taking care of animals for a living, he's an older man. Anything else at all? All right, keep pushing ahead. Just read 17 through 24.
Then Jacob rose and sent his sons and his wives on camels, and he carried away all his livestock and all his possessions which he had gained, his acquired livestock which he had gained in Padan Aram, to go to his father Isaac in the land of Canaan. Now Laban had gone to shear his sheep, and Rachel had stolen the household idols that were her father's. And Jacob stole away, unknown to Laban the Syrian, and that he did not tell him that he intended to flee. So he fled with all that he had. he arose across the river and headed toward the mountains of Gilead. And Laban was told on the third day that Jacob had fled. Then he took his brethren with him and pursued him for 7 days' journey. And he overtook him in the mountains of Gilead. But God had come to Laban the Syrian in a dream by night, and said to him, Be careful that you speak to Jacob, neither good nor bad.
Okay. So, kind of going back to what was said earlier, they were already kind of 3 days apart, right? When they, in the first chapter 30, where they broke up their camps. Then it points out here that Laban had gone off to shear his sheep. Again, this reasoning, he probably didn't do that in the camps they're in. He probably went out even further to where his flocks were to take care of this. Jacob sees this as an opportunity. Not only are we 3 days apart, we're 3 days plus apart now. Now's the time to go. And so they load up everything, and it says he fled, but then it gives a qualifier. It doesn't necessarily he fled. How did he flee? By not telling Laban he was going to go. So he loads up his stuff. They cross the river. What river do they cross? You know what river that would be coming out of Syria?
Mine said Euphrates.
The Euphrates River, that's right. So and he's on his way. And it comes to, in verse 22, Laban finds out how many days after he'd left? 3 more days. So how many days did he be running down? 7. So kind of makes, if they were 3 days apart, he hears about it 3 days after he left. He chases him for 7 finally and catches up to him. And so, again, why would you chase somebody down? What would be the reason, the intent?
To regain your possessions.
Yeah, you're not going to say, hey, I wish you would have said goodbye. You're going back to get what you think is yours, right? Kind of think about Abraham with Lot. Whenever he heard about what they had been captured, he chased them down. What was he going to do? Recapture what was his, right? So God is not unaware of all this is going on. And God has probably not been spending any time talking to Laban because he's not God's people, but he does appear to him in a dream here and tells him what?
Don't do anything.
The King James reads, take heed that thou speak not to Jacob either good or bad. Does the ESV or anything say something different there? Same thing? Basically, you read that and you're like, because Laban, when he talks to him, is going to say kind of bad things to him, like you stole from me, basically, and all this stuff. So it must be a figure of speech, basically saying, don't touch him. Whatever you got planned to do, don't do it. Anything else in there?
Rachel stole, she said she stole her father's images, or she already had possession of them, or she go 3 days journey to go find them, take them.
That's a really good question, because they were apart.
So were they 3 days apart, or were they just 3 days ahead before he realized, because he was away shearing the sheep?
I wonder
I don't know if they were 3 days apart living.
I wonder if the flocks and the herdsmen were 3 days apart, and maybe they had a common camp. I don't know. I'm not sure, because when it comes time to leave, she's close enough
You know,
where she goes and gets them. So you wouldn't have thought that she would have traveled, had time to travel 3 to get and come back 3 days. You would have thought maybe that the family camp might have been common then.
to me,
That's a good point.
It's like it's kind of last minute thought to me.
Her taking them?
Yeah, like just kind of trying to get him more.
The only thing I can think of,
It's not taking-
we're only given the insight that we're given, so we infer this, right? Again, was Rachel and Leah happy with their father? No. They think that he had stolen their dowry? Yeah. Were the idols worth money? Oh yeah, they were. So I'm going to take them. So I don't know if she took them for their monetary value. I don't know if she took them as a gig to her father because it's something that he cherished and should have cherished them, so she wanted to hurt him. I don't know all the reasons. You hope that it wasn't because she was an idolatrous person and she wanted the idols for the sake that they were idols, but we're not told. But she takes them. So one of those reasons she takes them. Not sure which. Again, and it's going to create problems or potential problems. What else?
It's interesting, Laban's title changes from being Laban all this time to Laban the Syrian.
Yeah.
Every time he's referred to here.
It's interesting too. I didn't know necessarily why that is, but it is added here in this section, this instead of his plain name. Not sure why. Again, it doesn't seem that Jacob was aware of what Rachel had done. Matter of fact,
Later on.
it's very, very aware that he wasn't aware. So this is something she did on her own. Anything else? All right, 25 through 35.
Then Laban overtook Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tent in the mount of Laban, with his brother pitched in the mount of Gilead. And Laban said to Jacob, "What hast thou done? Thou hast stolen away unaware to me, and carried away my daughters as captives taken with the sword. Wherefore dost thou flee away secretly, and steal away from me, and does not tell me, that I might have sent thee away with birth and with song, with covered and with harp, and have not suffered me to kiss my sons and my daughters. Thou hast now done foolish in so doing. It is the power of my hand to do thee hurt, but the God of your fathers spake unto me yesterday, saying, Take thou heed that thou speak not to Jacob either good or bad. And now though thou wouldest need be gone because thou sore longest after thy father's house, yet wherefore hast thou stolen my God? And Jacob answered and said unto him, Because I was afraid that, for I said, Peradventure thou wouldest take thy daughters from me. With whomsoever thou findest thy gods, let me not live, let him not live before our brethren. Discerning thou what is thine with me, and take it to thee. For Jacob knew not that Rachel had stolen them. How far do we go down?
35, 2 more verses.
And they went into Jacob's tent, into Leah's tent, and into the two maids' tent, but he found them not. Then he went into Leah's tent, and entered into Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the images and put them in the camel's furniture and set upon them. And Laban searched all the tent, but found them not. And she said unto her father, Let it not displease thee, please my lord, that I cannot rise before thee, for the custom of women is among me. And he searched, but found not the images.
All right, good. 35. So Laban runs down Jacob, and they're both staying in the same area around the Mount of Gilead. And what was Laban? What did God tell him? The figure of speech again. What did he tell him? Don't speak good or bad to him. What happens in the next few verses? Is Laban speaking bad about him?
Yeah.
Well, he's speaking bad about him, right? So again, that's why I assume that don't speak good or bad has to be a figure of speech, like don't hurt him. And Laban's going to allude to that as well, right? Because he tells Jacob, what have you done? You stolen away unaware. You carried away my daughter as captives taken with the sword. So he kind of accuses him of like forcing his daughter to go against their will. Did the daughters want to go against their will? No, they were ready to go. They knew who their father was. And then he makes up a lie in verse 27. He goes, if you would have told me, he goes, I would have thrown basically a big party. He sent you away with mirth, with songs, with tabret and harp. Is that true?
No.
No, that is not what he would have done. Laban knew it. Jacob knew it. Leah and Rachel knew it. Everybody knew that's not the case, but Laban, I guess, makes himself feel better about himself by saying that. Verse 28 is a real reason, right? He says he didn't get to kiss his sons and daughters. He probably wanted to see his grandkids, right? He would have liked to have sent his grandkids off if they were going to leave. That's a real emotional thing. You can see that. But what also, not only did Jacob take away a bunch of wealth and flocks, how many kids are they taking away? at least 12 sons and one daughter. There was others too, but, and again, we talk about the importance of sons. Now he had his own sons, but this was going to be, these people lived a lot longer, because we said Jacob's 120, but where's Jacob going back to? His parents. So Isaac's still alive. So he's going back. So they lived longer. So not only were your immediate kids important to you to help you, especially if you're ranchers and farmers, man, but grandkids, yeah, you're gonna need 2 and 3 generations down of sons to help you do what you do to maintain your lifestyle, right? So they're leaving with 12 sons. That hurts. Or 11. Yeah, Joseph's not there yet. But that's an important thing, and upsetting to him. And then in verse 29, he tells his real reason of what he pursued him for. What does he say? It was in the power of my hand to hurt you. And that's why he was coming. And that's why God intervened. God again stopped him. And he says as much. He says, and he uses that figure of speech again, take thou heed that thou speak not to Jacob, either good or bad. So, again, he spoke bad about Jacob, but he wasn't going to touch him because God said don't. And again, if you take from Laban the idea, do you think he was a God-fearing person?
No.
You don't get that impression, right? Because you go back whenever they had the discussion originally when Isaac's servants were there getting Rebekah, his wife, and you remember when they recounted the whole story about, I prayed to God, the maiden that shows up to draw water, and I say, give me a drink, and she said, I'll give you a drink, but also give your camels a drink. That was going to be God's sign that was the right person. Do you remember what Laban's reaction was when they told him that story?
That they were really their relatives.
That's not what it wasn't. In fact, yes, he did recognize the fact that they were relatives, but when he told him that story, he said something.
He says, here is the God of your father.
He-
It's like it's not his God, it's like
Right, in this section here. But when that account happened way back when, he said, this is from God. Who are we to argue against it? So you get that he was a God believer, but what did Rachel just steal from him? His idols. So he wasn't monotheistic, or at least he's no longer simply monotheistic. He believes in idols as well.
Well, that's why Jacob was supposed to go back to there to be able to buy them. Yeah, because of the idolatry.
But when the original Jacob, it was Isaac.
Isaac.
That's why Abraham says, don't marry somebody from here. Go back to what? So I don't know if something because this is a pretty good stretch of time. I don't know if they were monotheistic and things changed. I do know that when people start chasing wealth, their idea of God certainly does change.
Abraham's from the same region, and learn in the book of Joshua that Abraham's dad was an idolater, so it's definitely part of the culture.
The
But
culture of that area.
maybe what was different was, I talked about Esau marrying Moabites and how that tortured the parents. Maybe the Moabites just had no concept of Jehovah God, whereas the people in Dan, Aram, they had a concept of Jehovah God, but they were divided in their allegiance. And so
That would
if
make
you
sense.
could take people out of there, you'd be able to focus.
Reinforce something they already halfway knew. That kind of reminds me again the idea of when Paul went and saw all the idols, and what did he say? I assume you're very religious, and you even have an altar to the unknown God. Let me tell you about him. So I guess maybe in a sense what you're saying is at least they were idolatrous people, but they at least had a knowledge of Yahweh, of the one God, and so you would be better taking a wife from there because at least you could teach her something she knew something about. Whereas the Canaanites had apparently nothing, no concept of God other than idols. Maybe.
It's interesting because Laban gets talked to by God, and doesn't seem shocked by it, but he knows it's authority, he can't go against it.
That's what I was going to say. I was building to the point of we don't have any inclination that Laban was God-fearing, but when God talked to him in that dream, whatever was revealed, however it was done, Laban's like, yeah, I'm gonna listen to you. I'm not gonna do it. So God has a way of whenever he wants to get his point across, it's received loud and clear. He wasn't gonna cross him.
Do you think after the blessings that Jacob brought to Laban, he recognized that those blessings came from God? Do you think Laban would start going
That way.
in that direction, getting rid of those idols and trying to see if he's a selfish individual, if it's working for him, I'll give it a shot.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of like Abimelech with Abraham. He said, we know, we've been blessed, because, God is with you, obviously, you've been dwelling with us, and we haven't done anything, bad to you, and we're being blessed because of it, so you would think that would help him. But again, people typically only serve one God, and for Laban's, it was greed, and he wasn't gonna, he couldn't get around that. So now he makes the accusation that he's been stolen from. And it wasn't just alluded to, but in 32, it tells us that Jacob didn't know what Rachel had done. So what does Jacob do? He believes he's an innocent man. An innocent man will say what?
Go ahead.
Look, see what you find. And then he doubles down and says, if you find it with anybody, what's going to happen? We'll kill him. So Jacob's feeling completely innocent in this. And then sometimes when someone makes such a strong claim, the person who's accusing will back off and say, no, okay, fair enough. What does Laban do? Ooh, he looks everywhere. Jacob's tent, Leah's tent, the servant's tent. He's going everywhere. He goes into Rachel's tent. And Rachel, again, hides them in stuff that she's sitting on and says, I can't get up. That's the one place he doesn't look. That's the one place she has them. And so when he comes out now, when Laban comes out, he hasn't found them after searching. You think Jacob, watching him go through all his stuff, looking for it, was that making Jacob happy or was that making Jacob angry? Because you're basically, when you tell him you don't have them, and he starts looking anyway, what does he say? What's the implication?
You're a liar.
You're a liar. You're a liar. And so Jacob's going to launch into a speech after this because he's had 20 plus years of aggravation, and to be called a liar on the way out, he's going to let him know what he thinks of him. So he doesn't find it. And then in verse 36, you will see the beginning of Jacob's wrath. Anything else in that?
Anything about what the customer women that Rachel qualifies on is?
Yeah. She says basically she lied to us. She was saying she was menstruating, so she couldn't get up. Is what she was saying. Glad you asked that. That's what we get around that, but I'm glad you brought it up there, JT. Huh? Yeah, she was taught how to lie, right? So yeah, that's what she used as an excuse. Verses 36 through 42.
Jacob wrought with God with Laban. Jacob answered to Laban, what is my trespass? What is my sin? What thou hast hotly pursued after me? Whereas thou hast felt about all my stuff, that what hast thou found of all my household stuff? Set it here before my brethren and thy brethren, that they may judge between us two. These 20 years have I been with thee. Thy ewes and thy she-goats have not cast their young, and the rams of thy flocks have I not eaten. That which torn of breast I brought unto thee, I bear the loss of it. Of my hand did thou require it, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. Thus I was in the day, the drought consumed me, and the frost by night, and my sheep fled from mine eyes. These 20 years have I been in thy house. I served thee 14 years for thy 2 daughters, and 6 years for thy flock. And thou hast changed my wages 10 times. Except the God of my father, God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac has been with me. Surely now hast thou sent me away empty. God hath seen my affliction, and the labor of my hands, and rebuked the Ishmaelite.
Thank you. I misspoke to you. I saw my note here. Isaac was at least 120, not Jacob. Jacob probably was closer. I have to go back and figure out how old he was, but he was probably 90 to 100, somewhere in that area. So Isaac, his father, was 120. So after Laban can't find anything, Jacob gets mad. And Jacob's going to let go 20 years of anger at him. And he goes through, what is my sin? What have I done that you so hotly pursued me? And he goes through and he lists not only the fact that he couldn't find the idols that were stolen, what does he go back and recount the past 20 years of how he treated Laban?
And tricked him with the marriage.
Tricked him with the marriage. You've changed my wages. And he also defends his integrity. He goes, when I was keeping your animals, if a wild animal came in and killed a cow, he goes, I didn't bring it to you and say, hey, here's the cow. He goes, I just paid with it with one of mine. He goes, I never did anything like that to you. He goes, but you have treated me horribly all this time. He goes, I lived out in the field. During the day, I was dying of thirst and beat down by the sun. At night, I froze to the desert out there. Again, it's hot in the day, but it's also very cold at night. He goes, I didn't get to sleep hardly at all. And he goes, again, the fact that you changed my wages, and it basically just pleads this whole case of how he was done wrong. And at the very end of it, his conclusion was, who had seen all the incorrections that were done to him? God saw it, and God rewarded me. And he goes, and also, what did God do to Laban? He says, you rebuked you last night for what you were coming to do more wrong to me. He refers to God a very interesting way in there, verse 42. How does he refer to God? God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac. That's going to come up again here in verse 53. And we've only got 5 minutes. I want to finish the chapter, so I'm going to go ahead and read the rest of it, and we'll talk about that last little bit right there. And Laban answered in verse 43 and said unto Jacob, these daughters are my daughters, these children are my children, and all these cattle are my cattle, and all that thou seest is mine. So does he get what Jacob is saying? No, all he can see is all this that you have is mine. And what can I do this day unto these my daughters, or unto the children which thou hast borne? Now therefore come thou, let us make a covenant, I and thou, and let it be for a witness between me and thee. And Jacob took a stone and set it up for a pillar. What does that remind you of? He's already done that before. When he saw Jacob's ladder, when he slept that night in the field, he set the pillar up and called it Bethel. He goes, this is surely the place. That's really where his conversion to God became, where he actually saw God face to face the first time. And Jacob said unto his brethren, verse 46, gather stones. They took stones and made a heap, and they did eat upon the heap. And Laban called it Jegar Sehatha. That's Aramaic for heap of testimony. But Jacob called it Galid, the heap of witness. That's in Hebrew. And Laban said, this heap is a witness between me and thee this day. Therefore was the name of it called Galid. And Mizpah, which means the watchtower. Where have you heard the expression the watchtower before? Jehovah's Witness. That's what they call their periodical, right? This is where they get it. For he said, the Lord watch between me and thee, and when we are absent from one another. If thou shalt afflict my daughters, or if thou shalt take other wives besides my daughters, no man is with us. See, God is witness between me and thee. So what's Laban ask of him? He asks him two things. Don't get any other wives. And basically take care of them, right? Don't afflict them, and don't take any other wives. And Laban said to Jacob, behold, this heap between us, this heap, and behold this pillar which I have cast betwixt me and thee. The heap be witness, and this pillar be witness. And I will not pass over this heap to thee, and thou shalt not pass over this heap, and this pillar unto me for harm. So it basically says, are they ever going to not see each other again? Doesn't say that. He says, you're not going to cross this boundary to come hurt us. It was basically like a boundary line that they're setting up. Verse 53, the God of Abraham, the God of Nahor, Abraham's brother, and the God of their father judge betwixt us. And Jacob sware by the fear of his father Isaac. There's that expression again. Then Jacob offered sacrifice upon the mount, and called his brethren to eat bread. They did eat bread and tarried all night in the mount. And early in the morning, Laban rose up and kissed his sons and daughters and blessed them, and Laban departed and returned into his place. Anything in there besides that figure of speech? I want to talk about the fear of his father Isaac. Anything else in there?
Guess they just kind of finally came to terms.
Everybody kind of expressed their grievances. Laban had been told by God, don't touch him. Jacob got to plead his case, and they make a pact. They make a pillar of stones. They eat upon it and says, this stone is a reminder that I'm not going to come across there and hurt you. We might not agree, but you're not going to come across here and hurt me. And Laban kind of says, as long as you don't hurt my daughters or take other wives, he goes, yeah, I'll agree to that. And they make an agreement. What do you think that expression, the fear of his father Isaac, means?
His father was retaliating against him, coming down to retaliate on his family.
You talking about his physical father? Who? Say it again.
I lost my train of thought.
Okay, well, if it comes back to you.
But fear is capitalized.
Is it capitalized in yours?
That refers to God, and that's a higher,
Okay.
the supreme. Usually
Uh,
if something's capitalized, that's what it means.
I believe you're correct. I've done some different things, and I know we're out of time, but I'll tell you this. I believe in the context, because it's all talking about God, it's another name for God, and he actually refers to him as the fear of his father Isaac. Do you know what Jesus said about God in Luke 12:5 when he talks about fear? Do you remember that context? Where he says, don't fear those who can kill the body. That's all they can do you. But I'll tell you who you should fear.
Wanted to kill his body, and so.
Yeah, it talks about you should fear God, right? But then in John 4:18, it talks about perfect love casting out fear. So basically the idea is this. In this list of people, is Abraham and Nahor, it's not called the fear of them. Are they still alive anymore? They've already passed on. Remember, if you go to the story of the rich man and Lazarus in the New Testament, where was Abraham described at? He's in the bosom of the Father, or Lazarus in the bosom of Abraham. He sits with the Father. He's in the presence of God at that point, The fear is not there. Isaac's still alive. Did it say Isaac fears God, the one he fears, that refers to God? Yeah, it's called the fear of Isaac. The fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. I think we should fear God, no doubt. As we go on further in Christianity, that fear should lessen, but that fear should never leave. I think the biggest problem you see nowadays, it used to be a really popular bumper sticker that said, no fear, kids had it on their car. That's exactly right. Man doesn't fear God anymore. Therefore, man does whatever he wants. Laban was coming to hurt Jacob, and God talked to him, and the fear of God stopped Laban from doing that. We should always maintain a very healthy respect and fear for God. We'll do chapter 32 next week.